Hi, have equivalent fractions been getting the best of you? Well, stick around and I'm going to show you the trick to doing them. Hi, welcome to the equivalent fractions video. Before we start, the first thing I'd like to let you know is that the most important thing in doing fractions, especially equivalent fractions, is to know this one thing. So, this important thing is that if you have a fraction, let's say 1/4, and you want to multiply it by 2, well, you would multiply it by 2 over 1, which would give you 2/4. What you've done here is you multiplied 1 out of 4 pieces by 2, and so now you have 2 out of 4 pieces. Now, this is important because if you want to multiply a fraction to make it bigger or smaller, but still keep the same proportion, you multiply it with having the numerator and the denominator the same number. So for example, if I want to take 1/4 and have it be the same equivalent fraction but in a bigger form, I just have to multiply it by any number with the numerator and the denominator being the same. So for example, I can multiply by 2 over 2, which would give you 2/8, which is also equal to 1/4, as I'm going to show later in this video. Another example is if you want to multiply 3/5 but still have it equal 3/5, you just multiply by any number, but you have to have the same number on the denominator and on the numerator. So I can multiply by 4 over 4, which would give me 12 over 20, because 3 times 4 is 12 over 20, which is still equal to 3/5. Now the question is, why are these fractions equivalent? The reason that these fractions are still equivalent is because when you multiply any number by a fraction that has the number on the top and the bottom, for example 4 over 4 or 2 over 2, well, we know that 4 divided by 4 is 1. So any number, like 4, divided by itself is equal to 1. What you have to understand is that the form of a fraction with having a number, let's say 5 over this bar that you see over 5, is actually a division problem too. It's 5 divided by 5, or 5 divided by 5 pieces. So you could replace that with 5 here and 5 there, and 5 divided by 5 is 1. So when you multiply any number by a fraction that looks like this, 5 over 5, you're multiplying it by 1. So what does this do? What's the point of multiplying a number by 1? When you multiply a fraction by 1, or any number that has the same number on the top and the same number on the bottom in the numerator and the denominator, what you're doing is you're changing the form of the fraction. The proportion, or the amount, is still exactly the same. So 1/2, or 1 out of 2, times 2 out of 2 is equal to 2/4. Now the question is, how do we know that 1 divided by 2, or 1/2, is also equal to 2 divided by 4, or 2/4? This is easily understandable if we just illustrate it, if we actually show what's happening here. Remember from my previous video on my introduction to fractions that this form of a fractions, is just simply saying that you have 2 pieces out of an available of 4. So let's illustrate this. So let's say we have a pie. So the first one is 1/2. So we're going to divide the same piece into 1/2. And sorry about this crooked circle. But the point is that you have a total of 2 pieces, which is the bottom number, and we want one of them, the top number. So we shade one of those pieces. So as you can see here, we have half of a pie. Now, how is this 2 out of 4 equal to 1 out of 2? Well, let's take this exact same pie, except this time we're going to divide it into 4 pieces. So we cut it this way and this way. Well, the pieces are smaller. However, you can see visually that when we divide this into 4 pieces, we still have this same area, 1 piece and 2 pieces, because it's 2 out of 4. Now you can see here that even though the pieces themselves are smaller, we still have the same amount of pie shaded. We could even take this a step further and multiply by 2 out of 2 again. So 2/4 multiplied by 2 out of 2, which, don't forget, is actually just equal to 1. All you're doing is you're making the pieces of the pie smaller. So 2 times 2 is 4. And 4 times 2 is 8. So what have we done now? So now, to illustrate this, we have a circle, once again. Except this time, instead of dividing it into 4 pieces, we divide it into how many? 8. This is the total number of pieces. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So I made 4 lines, and even though this is very badly cut, it's still going to be the same pie. So now we have to shade in 4 pieces. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So as you can see, even though we have 8 pieces out of the same pie, when we shade in 4 of them, we now have the same amount of pie as 2 out of 4 pieces, or 1 out of 2 pieces. If I was going to say this in a sentence, I could say that by eating 4 out of the 8 pieces, I've eaten half of the pie. So let's do another example. This next example, instead of a pie, I'm just going to do a regular square. So this square we can divide into however many pieces. Let's just divide it into 4 pieces to start with. So 1, 2, and that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. We can write this on the bottom as going to be 4, because that's 4 pieces total. And however many pieces we would like to shade, that's the number that's going to be on the top. So let's just say that we're going to shade in 3 of those pieces. So that's 1, 2, and 3. So that's 3. Now, as an equivalent fraction, let's just say that we want to multiply it by 3. Or we'd like to have 3 times as many total pieces. So now that we want to have 3 times as many pieces, we're going to multiply this by 3 over 3, which, don't forget, is actually just equal to 1, because 3 divided by 3 is 1. So 3 times 3 is 9, and 4 times 3 is 12. What you should take away from this is that the fraction of 3 out of 4 is equal to 9 out of 12. And the reason is because when we multiplied it by 3 over 3, we actually multiplied it by 1. So even though this fraction looks a little bit different, it's still the exact same fraction. It's the same proportion. 3 out of 4 pieces is the same amount as 9 out of 12 pieces. So now the more challenging part is, if you're given a question where you're asked to either make equivalent fractions or to determine whether the equivalent fractions are equivalent fractions, how do you do that? Well, let's start off with the first one, how to make equivalent fractions. So in order to make equivalent fractions, let's just say we're given a problem, and this says, make an equivalent fraction equal to 3 out of 5. Now remember, in order to make an equivalent fraction, we have to multiply this by 1. But the key is not just 1, but something that resembles 1, or 3 out of 3, which is equal to 1. Or you could even do 2 out of 2. So 2 divided by 2. Or really any number, as long as the numerator and the denominator are the same. As long as that's the case, then all of these fractions are going to be equal to 1. So let's just do 3 out of 3. So 3 times 3. So we're doing 3 out of 3. 3 times 3 is 9. And then 5 times 3, because we're doing this one right here. So 5 times 3 is 15. So 3 divided by 5 is equal to 9 divided by 15. Another way of saying this is if we have a pie and you split it up into 5 pieces and we take 3 of those, that's going to be the same amount as if we took that same pie, split it up into 15 smaller pieces, and then took 9 of those pieces. Equivalent fractions means that 3 out of 5, or 3/5, is the same as 9 out of 15. Let's do one more example. So let's say we're asked to make an equivalent fraction for 4 out of 7, 4/7. Well, once again, we have to multiply it by any number as long as the numerator and denominator are the same. And the reason is because when the numerator and the denominator are the same number, that's equal to 1. So 4 divided by 7, or 4/7 multiplied, let's do 5 out of 5. 5/5. So 4 out of 5 is equal to 20. 7 out of 5 is equal to 35. These fractions are equivalent. Now, one way that you could check your work is to take this same equivalent fraction which you just got, 20 over 35. So write it here. So 20 over 35. And then just divide it by any of these numbers, either by 4 out of 7s or 5 out of 5. The reason that you're going to divide by one of your old fractions is because it'll give you the other fraction. And if it doesn't, that means you made a mistake. So let's just do 4 out of 7. So 20 out of 35 divided by 4 out of 7. Well, we have 20 divided by 4. So 20 divided by 4 is equal to 5. The reason is because 4 goes into 20 5 times. So 20 divided by 4 is 5. So we have 5 in the denominator, or the numerator, pardon me. And for the denominator, we have the same thing, 5. The reason is because 7 goes into 35 5 times. Or in other words, 7 times 5 is 35. So what we have here is we have our solution, 20 out of 35. We checked our work by dividing it by 4/7, and that gave us our other fraction. So now we know that this was correct. Now this leads us into our next question. If you're given equivalent fractions, how do you figure out that they are in fact equivalent? So let's just start off with an example. So for our first example, we're given these two numbers. We're given the fraction of 4/10, so 4 out of 10, and 2 out of 5, 2/5. The question is 4/10 equivalent to 2/5? So this is our question. So the way that we would solve this is very similar to how we checked our work for the last problem, and it has to do with division. So just in the same way as if we were checking our work, can we multiply either of these numbers? So for example, 2/5, can we multiply by something that would make it equal to 4/10? Well, the answer is yes, we can. So let's just take 2/5. Well, we know that if we multiply 5 by 2, then we would get 10. And since we have to multiply by the numerator and the denominator while being the same number, so 2 out of 2, which, don't forget, equals 1. So we're not really changing the fraction, we're just changing what the fraction looks like. So 2 out of 2 is 4. And then 5 times 2 is 10. So yes, these fractions are equivalent. 2/5 is equivalent to 4/10 because if we multiply them by 1, or in this case 2 divided by 2, which equals 1, we get 4 out of 10ths. So yes, this is equivalent. So let's try another example. So for problem 2, we have 1 out of 7, or 1/7, and 3 out of 14. So 3/14. So my question to you is, are these equivalent? So go ahead and pause the video now, try this problem on your own, and when you unpause the video, I'm going to explain to you how to do it. Alright, welcome back. I'm assuming you tried the problem. So here's the solution. The solution is they are not equivalent. So how do we do this? Well, the key is whenever you're doing an equivalent fraction problem, first of all, ask yourself, when you look at the denominator for both these fractions, 7 and 14, ask yourself, can I multiply 7 by any number to make it equal to 14? Well, the answer is yes. I can multiply it by 2. So let's take 1/7, and I know that I can multiply this number by 2 to make it equal to 14. Now don't forget that when you're doing equivalent fractions, you also have to multiply the top number, or the numerator, by the same number. So in this case, this would also be 2, because 2 divided by 2 is equal to 1. I want to make sure you understand that when you're multiplying any of these fractions by a number that has the numerator and the denominator being the same number, you're just multiplying it by 1. So even though the fraction looks different, it's still the same number. So in this case, 7 times 2 is 14, and 1 times 2 is 2. So 2/14. So no, the answer is 2/14 is not equal to 3/14. These fractions are not equivalent. Right, so time for a quick review on how to check if fractions are equivalent. What you want to make sure you do when you're making an equivalent fraction, say 1/4, and you want to make it into any other equivalent fraction, you have to multiply it by a fraction that has the numerator and the denominator being the same number. So in this case, 3/3, or 2 out of 2, or you could even do 100 out of 100. It doesn't matter as long as the top number and the bottom number are the same. Now, when you're asked, is any fraction equivalent to another fraction, you have to look at the bottom denominator first. So for example, let's say we're given 1/2 and 4 out of 8, and you're asked, are these fractions equivalent? Well, look at the denominator and ask yourself, can I take this number, this 2, and multiply it by any number that's going to give me 8? In this case, the answer is yes. We know that 2 times 4 is 8. So you take that first fraction, you multiply it by 4, and since you're just multiplying it by 1, it's going to be 4 divided by 4, because 4 divided by 4 is equal to 1. And that gives us 4 out of 8. Sorry, that looks like a triangle. Okay, so 4 divided by 8. 4/8 is equal to 4/8, or 1/2 is equal to 4/8. So these fractions are equivalent. Alright, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and leave any comments if you have questions.